Welcome to Best Way to Divorce, and today I have Tom who's coming to talk to us. It's not a happy conversation in many ways, but it's one that needs to be had, and more people need to know what's going on in the UK, and I'm sure this also affects many dads and mums in other parts of the world too. But we'll be specific to the UK situation today. I'm going to introduce you now to Tom.
Good evening. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for making time to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. And just to start with, perhaps say a little bit about why you're here. Why is it that what we're going to talk about is actually quite important?
So we're here because in 2018, my daughter was abducted to Poland unlawfully against a court order issued in the jurisdiction of the UK courts. And despite that, Rianne remains in Poland, illegally detained now. Yeah.
And the first thought that came to my mind when I first heard this was, is that just because it's Poland? Surely that would never happen in France or Germany.
Well, ironically, it does, and of course, at the start of this journey for me, I never knew the extent of child abduction. Poland is a particular hotspot, as is northern Cyprus. But children are, because I suppose my area of expertise is Poland, but children disappear at the behest of their parents from France, Italy, Germany, Sweden, Spain, and Ireland. Just a few, and the big ones that people have probably heard about, possibly from the USA to Japan, because Japan is a bit has the same philosophy as Poland in terms of parenting.
And might as well get straight to the most obvious question: is that, as you pointed out, it is an abduction for one parent to steal away a child to another country and prevent access and completely illegal, and the courts can rule that that's wrong, and yet nothing happens. How can you begin to explain how that can be the case?
So I think we need to split it into two halves, first of all. First of all, let's deal with the civil aspect. So following a separation of a family, more often than not, it'll end up in the family courts over access rights or custody or whatever. And the court will issue a court order. The first one is usually a live with order, with who the children would live with, and then what access the other parent can have. As part of that arrangement, that child arrangements order, if you're the parent who has custody, you're allowed to take your child out of the country for up to 28 days. Don't have to ask anyone's permission, you can just go. However, if you don't return, you haven't committed a criminal offence. Okay, so you may be in breach of the court order in the UK, which theoretically is a criminal offence, but there's a stated case called the Nikolai loophole, which in essence is if you take a child out of the UK and refuse to return, that child is just illegally retained in a foreign country by that parent. That is not a criminal offence. That comes under the civil aspects of international child abduction, commonly known as the 1980 Hague Convention. But we'll probably talk about that a little bit more later on. So the other aspect is the criminal aspect. So if the abduction of the child is planned and is clearly planned, then that is a criminal offence under Section 1 of the 1984 Child Abduction Act. Quite straightforward. Now the issue is, in this country, parents will often say they're going to take a child on holiday and not return. And then you get yourself into all sorts of challenges with, for example, the police. So the police will. So when I reported my daughter, the police said, "We're not going to do anything because the other parent's taking your daughter on holiday and not come back. That's not a criminal offence." And I said, "Well, it is a criminal offence because it was premeditated. Well, where's your evidence?" So I then had to start finding the evidence, and I kept pushing. In this case, Essex Police, and they wouldn't cooperate, and because they said it was a civil case. And anyway, they said you have to wait 28 days, which is the civil aspect of it. If they hadn't waited 28 days, my daughter might well have been home because they would have gone as an abducted child, got international arrest warrants and Interpol and all of that. But they didn't. And then we left the EU. And that's another story again.
But
So,
actually, at not wanting to interrupt your flow,
yeah,
I think it's important to just to kind of unpick a little bit of what you said there. So there is this, and I think this is an issue with all family law, is people can behave very, very badly, but it's not criminal. It seems to have different rules. But are you saying that they could have, because you have, as long as you can show evidence of premeditation, they could have taken action and done something about it? Or is that, when you say could, do you mean it would be good if they had, but actually that just doesn't happen at all?
right. So they should have done. They should have believed what I said. If they'd believed what I said and did a proper investigation, they'd have found the evidence. I'd already given them a lot of evidence. So part of it is not wanting to believe that a mother would abduct a child.
Mm-hmm.
Part of it's possibly how we see our social values in terms of parenting, and the misconception that a child belongs to a mother, not the father. So if they believe it's premeditated, they should and could take action, and that will help you enormously. But you would still run both courses anyway. You would still, the police would run their criminal course, and you would run your civil course, mainly because you don't really have a choice if you want to stand any chance of getting to see your child again.
So you can't, even if the police do take action, you can't guarantee that's going to be successful. So you need to follow your own civil path. And has that been affected in any way by Brexit?
Okay, so the criminal side was affected by Brexit because under the EU regulations, the international arrest warrant that's currently in circulation for my daughter's abductor would have applied from day one, the day they got it. As soon as we left the EU, we have what's called a trade agreement with Poland. And in that trade agreement, Poland refused to sign the section which said they would extradite Polish nationals to the UK for anything other than a terrorist offence. So in essence, a non-UK national can come to this country, commit crimes, depending on which country they go back to, and not be returned, other than for terrorism. And that includes potentially murder as well.
One of the many list of catastrophes over a very poorly done legal side of all of that. But of course, one that has a massive implication for parents, because people fall in love with people of other nationalities, don't they? And the children. And it's this. So with the child who has, before we get a little bit more into your own story, and thank you for being so informative about all of this, because it makes it incredibly valuable to anyone listening who may potentially be in this situation or know someone who is. Would it be true to say that the whole process of what happened, is there anything that can be done in advance to prevent that? So, for example, would a red flag be, oh, my child has dual citizenship and the other parent is taking them on holiday and things are not going too well between us at the moment, and if they didn't have dual citizenship, they didn't have a passport for that country, would you then be able to go, oh, there's no worry about them going on holiday there, it should be fine?
Okay, so it matters little. If you want to get out of the UK, whether you've got a passport or not, you can do it. It'll depend on how much money you've got. There are things that can be done. So, and it's irrelevant whether they've got dual nationality or not, because the country they go to, they're abducting to, is usually their home country, and that home country will give the child dual nationality anyway. It's their birthright entitlement. So if you suspect your child's going to be abducted, you can go to the court and you can get a preventative steps order. And basically that, in theory, would prevent the child from leaving the country, assuming whoever's got the passports is allowed to has to hand those passports over. So if I go to my case then, so I went to get a preventative steps order a year or so before Rian's abduction, but I was refused the preventative steps order. I was refused it on the basis of what my daughter's abductor told the court, much of which was semi-true, shall we say, but it didn't account for the potential order. So I had to hand my daughter's passport over, and we then went through lengthy court proceedings, and as you know, Rian was eventually abducted to Poland. So you can get a preventative steps order. Now, in terms of what can a government do, okay, because this is quite important, you can leave this country with a child and you will not be challenged. You can get through customs and excise with a child and not be challenged. Even if that child looks nothing like you, including their colour, their race, or whatever, you can leave this country with a child. That is wrong. Okay, that's fundamentally wrong. And what is ridiculous about it is when you come back to the country, to the UK, with a child that does not look like you, you will be challenged. Right?
Yeah.
So we're now into a very absurd situation where anyone can leave the country, irrespective of whether they look like their parents or not, or their step-parents, or a stranger, but you can't get back in. So the first thing this government needs to do is every child that leaves this country, or is intended to leave this country, must have proof that they're allowed to do so. And that proof must be a court order, or if it's just a man and wife and they're going on holiday, a letter of authorization with telephone numbers on it, and so on and so forth. The other things you can do, and it depends on your views on social services. If you believe that the other parent is a flight risk, then you could tell social services and get social services involved. And the reason you would do this is because if social services believe there's a flight risk, because you have to remember that child abduction is child abuse. There's no point in skating around it. If you abduct a child, it's a form of abuse. Then they can remove that child, and they can place that child in a safe place until the situation is resolved one way or the other. You can try and contact the passport agency and express your concerns, but if you're not the applicant, i.e. the person who took the passport out, then the chances are you're not going to get anywhere. Okay, and some of this I'm not speaking from experience. It's hypothesizing. Some of it is from experience. But
Can I just ask you before you go, when you talk about the flight risk, do you mean that maybe they have a drug issues, alcoholism? What does that mean, that they're a flight risk?
A risk of flight means that they're going to leave the country.
Oh, right. Okay.
So
it doesn't mean they're going to cause trouble on the plane or something.
A flight risk is someone who's at risk of leaving the country, either legally or illegally, depending who they're taking with them. So if you're in a relationship and you believe, as I did, that your partner, wife, is going to leave the country and take your child with them, then you have to articulate that ideally to the courts. You could, in anticipation, also inform the police. So, I'm now talking about things I should have done but didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
You could inform the police and say, I believe my ex-partner is at risk of fleeing the country and abducting my daughter. You can tell social service, you can tell the passports agency, but there's no guarantee whatsoever that any of them will respond. Because what you've got to remember is, as soon as the police, social services go round to that other parent is going to fight tooth and nail to stopping their intentions. And that will usually start with a range of false allegations.
Yeah, that does seem to be a very common pattern. That suddenly you become an abusive parent, and all kinds of claims come out of the woodwork, which were never mentioned in the past, and have to be dealt with. I mean, you can't just ignore them, can you? You have to go through the legal processes to refute them, and in a sense, do you think that? Because I think this is a good time to ask this question. Do you think that under that massive emotional onslaught, because that's what it is, that there are parents, in many cases dads, who will give up at that point?
Well, the answer is yes. The answer is yes on a number of fronts. First of all, say you are not a UK national, but you live in the UK with the other parent who's not a UK national. So you're now in a foreign country. You may have only been here, I don't know, 2 or 5 years, and then your wife or your partner decides to go back to your home country. Under the Hague Convention, you'd have to start proceedings in the UK, and those proceedings will continue in the country of where the child was abducted. But if you don't know the legal system in that country, and to be fair, most of us don't, until we're in it, then it can be overwhelming. And then you've got other issues like, well, who's gonna champion my case? Who will be my solicitor? Who will be my barrister? Oh, and more importantly, where's the money going to come from? So I didn't get legal aid. I had to pay for it in the UK and in Poland. And if I were to say conservatively, legal fees in the UK and Poland have come to over £160,000, and basically financially wiped me out and the family. But these are the things that you're going to face. And one of the things we very briefly touched on one is, why do men give up, particularly, and why do they end up taking their own lives? And this is just one element of a set of trauma circumstances which are extreme. And as the parent of an abducted child, I will tell you now, you will walk that path on your own. Initially, you will have support in the early stages, or eventually, everyone will get fed up, and everyone will get bored, and you will be on your own, and that's probably when you're at the highest level of risk. But it's a roller coaster.
And amongst the sort of desolation of that situation, there is some support. If you know about it, I'm amazed how many people I talk to who don't know about Families Need Fathers, for example, as a support network. Are there any others that you've come across where just having people that you can talk about this with who know exactly what that situation is? And as you say, for a lot of people, it's not just that they get bored. I think they're probably uncomfortable. They feel powerless, and they just rather not have to to deal with it. So you do end up completely on your own.
So from a dad's point of view, you're really limited. Mankind Initiative are a good source of general support for men. First Chapter are another support. You do have to be careful who you talk to, because not everyone's going to be on your side. And it's not about being on side, it's about listening. But people, whether you like it or not, if you're a father, you're going to come across your critics. So, and you sort of come into it a bit about actually who do you talk to, because all those people you were thought were family and friends will now be divided. So having someone independently, like fathers need families, First Chapter and Mankind Initiative is helpful.
Yeah, essential, I would imagine. Also, you can get some practical support through Families and Fathers, kind of, for the self-representing, the legal side, which I want to get into it in a minute. But I'll just I wanted to also ask you just a little bit more your own personal situation. If you're okay to talk about it with your daughter, what age she was, what has been your own lived experience of this, because you've clearly not given up yet.
No, I'm not. And ironically, the 9th of August, 2 days ago, was the fifth anniversary of Rian's abduction to Poland. And next week she will be 10 years old. So Rian was abducted in 2018, just 4 weeks before her 5th birthday. And that was 1 month after the family courts at Peterborough had ruled that she could not be taken out of the country permanently. And I'd been awarded significantly more time with my daughter. So I'd gone from being an every other weekend dad for a couple of hours to half the summer holidays, half Christmas, and half everything, basically the way it should be, other than alternate weeks at each house, if you know what I mean. So I remember so Rian had gone on a holiday to Poland for 3 weeks. She was due back on the 28th of August. I got an email, a text message at 7:30 in the morning saying we're not coming back. And at that point, my whole world changed, because I was actually getting in the car to go and pick Rian up to come and stay with me for the week's holiday. And at that point, my whole world changed. It collapsed. And no matter how much you tell yourself, it's going to happen, because I believed it did. I did know it was going to happen, although I couldn't do anything about it. You still go into basically a bereavement cycle. You go into denial and so on and so forth. So the first thing I did was I phoned the police. Eventually they came round. I emailed the family courts, told them what had happened. They eventually issued a return order. Actually, to be fair to them, they did it within 3 days. I then had to fill in a lengthy form for the International Abduction and Contact Unit in London to start my Hague Convention proceedings. I then had to start gathering evidence. In the meantime, I got a court order from Poland saying my parental rights were going to be removed. The court luckily rejected that, and that formed part of the evidence of this was premeditated. So
can I just ask, at this stage, what was your percentage between 0 and 100% of hope that actually all of these actions should, by rights, result in the return of your daughter?
I was 100% convinced.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd been through the family courts in Peterborough. All the false accusations that were made against me in the courts were proven to be lies. The Kafkas interview clearly, of which there was a number, clearly identified that the sole intention of going to Poland was to remove Rianne from my life. The mother made she was not backwards in coming forwards and telling Kafkas that, which is probably why I won. So I believed 100% that it was Poland for a start. So UK has an excellent relationship with Poland, so that should be okay. I believed in the UK family court system. I believed in international justice. And the only thing I can say is, how wrong was I? So I did believe in the police, but I don't anymore.
When was the first moment that you began to doubt and to think, well, hang on, there's something wrong here?
So if I just go back a little bit, so I won my Hague Convention case in February 2019, and my daughter's return was ordered within 2 weeks. That was a voluntary return. That didn't happen. She went into hiding and she lodged an appeal. So then the Polish court, started enforcement proceedings. And I attended the first enforcement attempt, which wasn't until September of 2019, so nearly 6 months later. And that was after she lost her appeal at the Warsaw Appeal Court. But in Poland they call them curators. In the UK we call them bailiffs. But the curator was not vested in returning my daughter. And at the end of the day, in trying to locate Rianne and going to the property and so like that, she basically told me that she was too tired to carry on that day. Bearing in mind that I'd driven 18 hours to get there because I brought my car over because I thought I was taking my daughter home. All the money involved, and she told me she was too tired. So at the time I could still afford a solicitor, so I phoned my solicitor, and 2 further attempts took place that week. But clearly by that time, someone was tipping her off that recovery was taking place. And at that point, I basically lost all faith in the legal systems in Poland, and to be fair, in England. And every subsequent recovery attempt, of which there have now been 7. The last one took place on the 6th of July 2023. I could predict the people involved, the day, and exactly what would happen, and everyone is exactly the same now. So the conclusion is they're just going through the motions. So cocky is my daughter's abductor. Is my daughter appeared in the local press, receiving awards from the Polish Fire Brigade, and yet I'm told that the courts can't find my daughter, Polish police can't find my daughter. However, Interpol can't find my daughter, but the Polish Fire Brigade, they can find my daughter, and the local press can find my daughter. And I just start to realise that everything I'm being told by the Polish authorities, including the curator, are lies. They are just outright lies. So.
And at this point, I think it's important to ask 2 questions. One, do you think this can be true in other countries? This extreme situation where the authorities are actively engaged in not complying with court orders to return a child to their other parent, or do you think it's just Poland that's got this issue? And also, why is this the case? Because I think a lot of people will be listening and thinking, no, surely that can't be right, because it seems so extreme.
Right. Okay. So there are reasons why a child can be refused to be returned, and that's under the Hague Convention under Article 13b. where the child is at grave risk of harm. So under those circumstances, irrespective of it's a mother or father, the court can refuse to return the child. But at an evidence-based assessment, okay, it's not just hearsay, it's evidence-based. Poland has a particularly poor performance in returning children, so much so that prior to 2018, the European Commission wrote a report and told Poland, you must do better. So Poland changed all its court systems and its recovery proceedings. Other countries are not as bad as Poland. So Poland's return rate is probably below 50%, well below 50%. The UK's return rate is well into the 80s, and other countries are everywhere in between. Right. So that brings us to the issue of why is Poland so bad? Right. So this is the politics of it. There's a government empowered in Poland called PiS, P-I-S. They are at war with the European Union. And if the European Union tell Poland to do something, the first thing Poland will do is not do it. And at the moment, they're not just using my child, because there are 5 fathers and 7 children, 5 fathers fighting for 7 children illegally detained in Poland. And that's just British children. I'm not talking about any other children. It's so bad in Poland that the European Commission for Justice has launched infringement proceedings against Poland. And my case is cited in those proceedings. The Polish Justice Minister publicly went on Twitter and told the EU, get your filthy hands off our Polish children. That was his response. But these children are not Polish. These children are born in the United Kingdom and they are of mixed heritage. Yes? That's how I describe it. Their fathers are not abusers. Their fathers are caring and loving fathers. So, and Poland, this government, the Polish government have continued along this tack. And I don't think it's just with UK children. I think it's with any children. Yeah. Any child from any country. It's just their stance. And the UK government are unwilling, and the UK government would tell you it's because of the Vienna Convention, to interfere or intervene. And the way I like to put it is, while the UK government plays cricket, obeying all the rules, everyone else around us is not. And as a consequence, our children are being abducted and abused. Because one of the things that I hope to talk about later is what happens when my daughter finds out actually what did happen.
Yeah.
So this is our children are collateral damage in a political game, and at the moment it's a political game in terms of the current Polish government winning votes, because they've just announced their elections in October. It's a Polish government fighting against the European Union, and it's a Polish government who, from my point of view, just believe that they're better than everyone else. And it really sticks in my throat because we say, not me personally, but my dad and my granddad were in 2 world wars, defending the rights of freedom of everyone, not just Poland, but Poland were particularly savaged by it. When Belarus were forcing migrants over the border at the direction of Russia, it was the UK soldiers who went up and put a fence up over there to stop them coming into Poland. It was the UK who were the first country to put troops in Poland. to defend their borders. And yet, Poland will not reciprocate. And I did have a meeting with a gentleman called Chris Heaton Harrison. He's a Tory whip, and for the whole 2 weeks he was a minister for the Foreign Commonwealth Development Office, and he's the only person I actually met who actually convinced me he would do something. And he said to me, "We do more for Poland than Poland will ever do for us, and we continue to do so. And this is how they treat their allies." Unfortunately, Chris moved on and became Secretary of State for something else. But anyway.
So actually, on that point, have you had what's been the reaction of the local MP and any kind of political high level support that you've sought over these years?
Okay, so my MP was Priti Patel. Is Priti Patel?
Oh dear.
So she was, as you know, she was Home Secretary. Because she was a serving minister, there was little or nothing she could do. She could write letters. When she stopped becoming a serving minister, I wrote to her and said, "Okay, now we need to go." She did make tremendous efforts, but to no avail. I'm not sure if you're aware, but I've had two questions asked in the House of Parliament about my daughter, resulted in nothing. We managed to get a debate in the House of Commons on international child abduction, where Poland is cited as being antagonistic and unwilling to cooperate. So that's recorded for posterity, as it were. Nothing. In the meantime, we have companies like MBDMA opening a factory in Poland, millions of pound investment. MBDMA are a British company. And the thing is no one wants to upset Poland because Poland's a development opportunity. And of course, Poland is the link through to the Ukraine.
Yeah.
And get my crystal ball out, you can sort of see where all the money is going to go, can't you?
Yeah. And the whole politics around it. And so even someone like Priti Patel, who can appear to wield such power with sending people to different countries, but she's not allowed to bring back a child who actually belongs as much in the UK as Poland. So that's quite ironic, really. So with this, I don't want to let the rest other countries off the hook, because I believe you were at the House of Parliament with a certain Baroness who is part of family.
Baroness Meyer,
Can you say a little bit about that? Because she'd had quite a lot of trouble with Germany, hadn't she? And she didn't seem to think things had got much better.
No, so I was very, very fortunate, as a number of us were, to meet the Baroness. And I suppose this puts things into context. Her children were abducted to Germany. She was married to a diplomat, a high-ranking diplomat. And that diplomat got a posting to the USA as an ambassador to the UK, as a British ambassador to the USA. So the Baroness found herself very much in the limelight, because once the US press found out what had happened to her children, they were really interested in it. And she'd been on some of the most high-profile programs in the US. I think I can't think of the publications, but I think Time is one of them. New York Times, and the publicity you could die for in this situation. And their children remain in Germany. And she got no traction. She clearly, they were financially okay. In her case, though, the courts, I think, ruled against her in Germany. but don't hold me to that. I would have to speak
I
to the
thought I
Baroness.
thought she'd had, like you, quite a few successes. It just didn't make any difference.
Yeah, yeah,
My abiding memory of that meeting was her saying the law's an ass,
yeah.
and
I mean, just
yeah,
quite possibly. I mean, a lot's gone on. But either way, and to be fair, it just makes it worse if she did win, because
yeah,
she still didn't get her
yeah,
children back,
yeah.
and despite the profile she had, nothing changed, and still nothing's changed. The only thing, if you speak to the Baroness now, that she will tell you is that I do see my children now, but they're not children anymore.
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
adults.
And they reached out, which is why, is, you know, as you said earlier, it's an important thing to talk about, because one of the most sort of heartbreaking parts of her sharing her story with everyone was that finally her I think her sons reached out to her, but she's lost all of those years, and may have been a certain amount of parental alienation or confusion, and how do you as a parent say to your child, you know, you were abducted, and that parent
Yeah.
that's been the main person in your life. I mean, you're between a rock and a hard place, because anything you say that criticizes the other parent is harmful to that child.
It's a really moot point, isn't it? Because I know, well, I don't know if I know really. So my daughter's 10 next week. At some point between 10 and 18, she's going to find the internet. And at some point, she's going to find herself on the internet, either on a wanted post, on a missing persons poster, or she's going to see her mum on a wanted poster. And she's sort of going to wonder why. Now, I can't imagine waking up one morning and realizing that the very people who told me that they loved and cared for me and were there to protect me abducted me, but done it in such a ways that they made themselves to be a criminal, that they told lies about the other parent, and that parent has never stopped looking for them, trying to find them. How do you process that as a 10, 12, 13, 18-year-old? I would suggest it's as well as being life changing. I would think it's quite traumatic.
Absolutely.
And one of my biggest fears is that when she learns about the trauma, will she actually be capable of dealing with the trauma? Because one of the things that is not known is that alienated children, and I'm not saying child abducted children, I'm saying alienated children, many go on to self-harm.
Yeah.
Some do go on to take their own lives. And that frightens me, that. Because, for example, if I'd have just melted away into the background, then Rian may never have known about me. I still don't know if she will or not. But then she would carry on living her life in ignorance. And quite often, ignorance can be bliss, can't it? So there's no right or wrong. You choose your path, and you keep your fingers crossed, and you say, when that day comes, I will be there. Well, you hope you'll be there, because clearly you're dealing with your own trauma as well. And then there's other things that come into the mix. During Rian's abduction, there was a case in Poland where a mother had abducted two of her children, and the court ruled in the father's favour. But rather than return the children to the mother, she murdered them and then killed herself. Uh, there was a guy in America called John Masters. He spent 3 or 4 years fighting to see his children. He was shot dead by his father-in-law a couple of weeks after the courts gave him access to his children. I get that these are extremes, but they're becoming more frequent as every year passes, and we're treading a fine line between what used to be unusual to becoming the norm, and I find that frightening.
It's terrifying, and I think it goes back to what you said earlier. To take a child away from a parent, to inevitably have to lie to them, because they're not going to go, oh, by the way, I've abducted you. They'll at best say nothing about the other parent, and at worst are more likely say things that excuse the fact that the child is not seeing the parent. So there will usually be parental alienation, and even up to that point, it is definitely child abuse. But the real child abuse effectively kicks in, as you say, when the truth comes out, and that's the horrible irony of it all. And also for the I can't even imagine it, of course, but if you're, as a parent, once you're in that situation, you've got the child who finally knows the truth, you're not in a position to criticize the other parent, because that's not going to help you. They've got enough to deal with already. So would it be true to say, and is it too unrealistic to say, that at that point is when that parent who's finally got able to be and meet even their child, who's probably by then a fully grown adult, that they need to be in a place of kind of deep acceptance and even almost forgiveness in a way of what's happened, in order to be able to just hold this loving space for that child, where there's no blame and where the child doesn't have to feel guilty. Because if you're carrying that anger still and that rage, which is somewhat inevitable through what you've been through, that's going to be in itself a barrier. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely, and I think because I talked earlier about the bereavement cycle, and I know where I am in that bereavement cycle. I go from and as I say, I forgot. so, I cycle between anger and depression in that cycle, and simple things can trigger it, and also having to live through and do the recoveries, because that's re-traumatization. So, but when I see my daughter again, my first question always to myself is, will I recognize her, and what will I want to do? And of course, my natural instinct will be to want to go over and hug her, but in essence, she's not quite my daughter anymore. So, as a parent, you're going to have to sort of let them take the lead and exercise a level of patience that you've probably never ever believed that you exist, or that you even had, because your job will be to pave the way to a better relationship, and a relationship of longevity. So, and of course that depends where you are as an individual in your own life. So for me, it's a little bit different because I'm 60 years old now. So what I think about is, will I live long enough to see my daughter, full stop? My life expectancy is, if I'm lucky, till I'm 80-ish. So that gives me 20 years. But, as I see in the news every day, people I grew up with, people like Sinead O'Connor, they're not here anymore. And so your own mortality comes into it if you're of a certain age. But at the end of the day, and it always comes down to this: no matter what's going on, your child comes first. in the best interests of the child. If people would only stop and use it as a mantra, no matter what they're going through, what is in the best interest of the child. And notwithstanding absolutely some dreadful circumstances, in the best interest of the child is to have both parents in their life. There are always the exceptions to the rule, and that can't be denied. And I don't seek to justify that, nor do I seek to mitigate the abuse that both men and women go through as they come in and out of relationships. But the one thing people really need to hold dear to their hearts is in the best interests of the child. So let me just run through that with you. If Essex Police had put in the best interests of the child at the forefront of their minds, they'd have gone for an international arrest warrant, an extradition warrant. My daughter would be home. If the Polish courts and the Polish enforcement people had put the best interests of the child, my daughter would home, remembering that even when my daughter was to be returned, which was with or without her mother, I wouldn't have stopped contact. Also, even though I'm the victim, I was required to almost put up a surety of paying for her accommodation, food, and finding her a job when she returned. I did all of that because I operated in the best interest of the child. It was the best interest of my child to come back to the UK and to have a loving relationship with her father and her mother, irrespective of what her mother did. And I still maintain that. And I will stay true to my word. I want to see my daughter. I want to tell her I love her and I miss her, because that's in her best interest. I think you're on mute.
Sorry, that came. Thank you for telling me. I was so emotional. I forgot to push my unmute button. No, I just think what you said was so beautiful, so true, and incredibly difficult to achieve. But I hope that every father and mother whose children have been taken in this way can really listen carefully to what you've said. And just to round off, if it's okay to share, how has this experience changed you in all ways, negative and positive?
Okay, so I'm damaged, really damaged. For a long time, I was on like 60 milligrams of whatever antidepressants I was on. That was the maximum I could have. I couldn't look at a picture of my daughter, so I couldn't have one hanging up because it was too painful. I can now. Burst into tears at the drop of a hat. Very withdrawn. Trying to solve problems. I'm struggling to think of a positive other than I have returned to work. I tried my hardest.
Can I say that when I've observed through this conversation is your ability to, despite everything, to put your child first and to advocate that for others, and not to use this as an opportunity to slag off your ex. You've really been really factual and straightforward with it, and I have to say that is a difficult thing to do in those circumstances, and something you should acknowledge that it's a huge achievement.
Yeah, I suppose it comes down to personality traits, isn't it? I don't tell lies. I only tell the truth. If I tell the truth, I have nothing to hide. And I tell people the truth and the facts because they stand on their own. I don't have to worry about it. And I've no need to do anything else because the courts have already done it for me. And you know, at the moment, I'm waiting for the decision of the European Court of Human Rights, and I'm hoping they will rule in my favour. Not that it will make any difference, but it'll be another moral victory. And of course, yeah, I just keep going because I don't know what else to do really.
And for any parent who's who don't want to make people paranoid about their ex going on holiday with their child, but if their ex is a national of another country, what would you advise any couple who, even if they're doing it in the most amicable way, or breaking up, what could they be agreeing to in their co-parenting agreement to give to prevent this even happening in the first place? Because it looks like the government aren't going to take up your suggestion any day soon.
All right. So if it's going to happen, it's going to happen. You won't be able to stop it. You might have a stay of execution. So we go back to, in your co-parenting agreement, the first line of your agreement should be in the best interest of the child. If you want to take it a step further, then one way of doing things, I don't know, would be to travel with them, take their passports back with you, and then go back and get them. I don't know. It really is a lottery. That is. I haven't got an answer, and I went with my gut feeling. But the trouble is that you more often than not, your gut feeling it will be right, but you may not get the response that you want, which means you're going to stand by and watch the train crash. So suppose if you're trying to prevent it, is you've got to try and have those open and frank conversations with the other parent, and ask them to put their children first. If they love their children, there's no need to do this. Don't have to love you. The children didn't decide who the parents were. You just got to agree to be civil and leave them out of it, and reach an agreement. You know, it's not that difficult. We understand life's challenging, but then you're just down to a flawed legal system and whether you get a good police force on a good day. And I can't really dress it up as anything else.
No. I
It'd be
appreciate your honesty.
dishonest.
Being best to be honest, and people to realise what they don't need are false promises and spend another £10,000 in legal fees that if it's actually not going to help them. But that's another conversation, I think, about the nitty gritty. And so, what can people do to help you?
To help me? Oh, okay. Well, you can go on Twitter. Find me on Twitter at Tom Toolan, or I've got Rhian Toolan's got a little bit of an account. I use both of those. I've just done a website for Rhian, so it's information Rhian Toolan at wix.com. So I'm on there. Find me on Facebook. If you're really feeling flush, you could donate to the GoFundMe site, because at some point I'm hoping to be able to go back to Poland and go through another recovery, but I have to do that because I can't not. And raise awareness of what is an awful crime, to be fair. And it's not there are two victims, the left behind parent and the child or children, and you can't undo what you've done. There's no going back once you've done it. All hell. And one thing I just want to finish off. This has been extremely stressful for me. Now, if I walk in Rianne's abductor's shoes, it must have equally been as stressful for her, including having to go into hiding and not being able to work. But not half of as stressful as it would have been for my daughter, not being able to, losing her family, losing her friends, not being able to go to school in Poland, having to learn a new language because she couldn't speak Polish when she went over there. It has an impact. There's no winners here. There are the only winners is the legal profession. Bearing in mind what I said earlier about how much money I've spent. And there are lots of losers, lots and lots of losers, and children are the big ones.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.